there, guys, and welcome to the Ruby Rose live stream here today on November 13th. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about Thanksgiving. Obviously, November is Turkey Month, as we all know. And so, we're going to talk a little bit about that, a little bit the history of Turkey Month, and where it comes from. So, first of all, though, I do want to talk a little bit about what's going on here at the Row. Right now, we do have a bunch of great exhibits up, of course, that we talked to you about. But we also do want to tell you guys a little bit about Giving Tuesday. Now, December 1st is a yearly celebration called Giving Tuesday. On December 1st, nonprofit organizations around the country will request donations, mostly online. So we are also going to be taking advantage of that this year. We're going to be adding a Facebook campaign, as well as on our website, we're going to have a special giving location that you can go and give to the Row just for Giving Tuesday. Giving Tuesday, like I said, is a special event, kind of to follow up with Black Friday and Cyber Monday. So if you guys are interested in getting involved with that, please keep an eye on the Facebook here, along with definitely check out our website and make some donations so we can keep the doors open for the year. But as I said, this year today we're going to talk a little bit about Thanksgiving. And Brooke has told me that she has the history of Thanksgiving and that what I've been told is wrong. So I'm going to tell her my story that I learned, and then she's going to tell me how I'm wrong. So the story I was always told as a kid, Brooke, was that the Pilgrims came, they had trouble surviving, and so a local native named Squanto came and taught them how to grow corn and beans and stuff like that using fish out of the ocean. So is that the correct story?
Somewhat and somewhat not. There's a little bit more to it than that.
Okay, I gotcha. So, well, the first thing I know when I was a kid that I always questioned was how Squanto could know English. I mean, he's a native, and I always thought that they were the first ones there. So how do you meet somebody when you get there that knows your language?
Right. So, how did the Pilgrims communicate with Squanto? How did he know English? And his tale is literally an adventure story, a series of misadventures. He was a young Indian of 12, and he's hanging out with his homies on the shore of Massachusetts collecting lobsters. And then all of a sudden, you see a ship coming in, and him and his buddies run down to greet the people who at that point, generally merchant ships would come in and trade. So he was used to seeing, a lot of activity, foreign activity on the shores. So he came down, they said, here, little kitty, eat some of this food. And then he said, yes. And then what ended up happening was they were kidnapped. They were taken aboard this ship and sold into slavery. He ended up sailing away from his land, his family, his tribe, and went to Spain. And ended up hooking up with some monks who taught him English. And he adapted to Christianity. And so he got some really good interpretive skills that he was able to use when he managed to earn his freedom and take that long voyage back to his, essentially motherland. So the whole process took about 10 years, this crazy misadventure. He came back to Massachusetts again 10 years later and found that there was no one here. Where was his family? Where was his friends? Where was his tribe? And it turned out that they all died of smallpox or some sort of disease that Europeans had brought over. So he was all alone. again in Massachusetts. And in that time period, he actually hooked up with a neighboring tribe.
All right, so he gets there, he joins up with the tribe, which I think was the Wampanoags, so that makes sense. And then he lives in the area. So how do the pilgrims enter the equation?
So it's kind of a serendipitous event. He comes back to Massachusetts. He's accepted into this neighboring tribe. And along the way, in the same time frame, uh, we have a ship uh, come over, basically seeking a space where they can grow in their religious faith. They're not running from persecution like a lot of historical texts talk about. They actually left England, 10 years prior to that, and moved to Holland to exercise the religious rights as Puritans, which is a very strict faith. And they found that Holland was too liberal in its ideals. They would have their kids come home and be very Holland, pro-Holland everything, their culture. And they said, okay, no, we can't do this. So they packed their bags, they moved to the Americas, and they ended up leaving in September. So this voyage, we're talking September, October, November, you're getting into December, and all of these pasty white people show up in Massachusetts, in the middle of dead winter, without any food, without any cattle, no animals, no preparation, and half of their population has died at that point. So they come across this Native American that not only knows their custom, knows the language, and is of Christian faith. They're able to use him as an interpreter for trading, for alliances with the neighboring tribes. And they actually are able to use him as someone that can teach them how to fish, how to get sap out of trees, how to hunt, how to sow seeds into the ground. They didn't know any of this. And why is that? Why did they not know necessary life skills?
So, while some people might know this, the Puritans, like you mentioned, were a very strict society. And one of the strictest things they were on was their child rearing. Historically, they were known to only teach their sons certain skills, and being that they were mostly urban people, they were, being a baker, being a butcher, making candlesticks, or being in some sort of leadership of the church or of the actual government. There were actually a number of Puritans that were leaders in the government at the time in Parliament, including Oliver Cromwell, which most people know from the English Civil War era, which was only about 40 years after the era we're talking about here. But they only taught their sons how to do those kind of businesses where they could make bread, but they didn't know how to get the wheat to make the bread. And then with their daughters, they basically taught them how to be housewives. There was no other skill that a woman had to have other than knowing how to make stuff at home. So none of them were trained. And then, like you said, there wasn't a lot that made it over. And so the chances are they may have had skilled men who knew what they were doing with farming with them, but those people didn't make it. They didn't get across the ocean. There was, I believe, about 50 to 100 that survived total. And so all they had were literally people for leadership. They had to have a church leader. So they had to have, there was one person that could have been helping them. They had to have local leadership like a governor. There were some more people. And so they didn't have a lot. So obviously they didn't have the skills. You just mentioned Squanto helped out quite a bit in how to survive. So after they got through the dark period, the period where, hey, we have no food, we're going to die, we're in trouble. What happened? How did it become the holiday we know? Why do we connect pilgrims to Thanksgiving?
One thing that we didn't know was that the ground that these pilgrims were settling on, they actually, even though there was a really, they were dying, scurvy, not enough food, half their population's gone, they're showing up in the middle of winter, you know, shelter is, an issue. So freezing to death is an issue. So when they show up, they actually come upon a piece of land that already has, a little bit of housing. There's huts on it. There's a repertoire of corn reserves. There's fresh water. And so literally they come upon an Indian tribal, basically deserted, tribe area. And who lived there? So the funny thing about it was that Squanto actually had a personal affection towards this piece of land because it was his own land. It was his tribe's land that had perished directly before the arrival of these pilgrims. So he felt a certain kinship to them, and he wanted to help them. And so he guided them through harvest and taught them the necessary skills that they needed to know to be able to survive. And so when harvest time came, they felt happy about their successes. And so the neighboring tribe ended up coming over in celebration. They brought 5 different deer, a lot of different game. And they said, hey, let's party. So 93 Indians and 53 surviving pilgrims sat around for 3 days and ate and ended up shooting guns the entire time.
So the straight-laced Puritans had a party with the natives. So how does that, I mean, obviously that's our first Thanksgiving. That's what we're talking about. So after that, why does it change? So, I mean, obviously I understand, I know, and from what I've read, after the 1621 big feast, it kind of changed. And from what I've read, the Puritans turned it into a day of prayer instead of a day of partying. And then over the years, it slowly transformed into what we have today. But I do know that when we're talking in the 1700s period, when the American country became a thing, that it was basically however the president felt like it. I know Washington held Thanksgiving in February, the first year he was president. And I think Adams, the first Adams, did 2 different Thanksgivings, and then Jefferson thought it was useless, so he didn't have Thanksgiving. So when did Thanksgiving become Thanksgiving? Instead of, I'm a state, I want to have Thanksgiving, I'm going to toss it whenever I feel like it.
Right. So the Puritans aren't big into, celebratory, fashions the way that the first Thanksgiving was held. They ended up adopting a celebration, but it was a religious one where instead of eating, you were fasting. It was a day of fasting. It was a day of prayers. You were inside the church. You were giving thanks to your God. And that lasted for a couple hundred years. And then, by the time the Civil War starts to encroach upon us, and of course we have, our win with the British, with the Battle of Saratoga, there was a sense of unifying our national pride. That was at stake. Like you said, Daniel, people were all over the place. What month is the celebration in? What day is it? How do you even celebrate? That was yet to be determined at that time. Here comes a magazine editor, Sarah Hale, and she decides in 1863 that there needs to be one day every year that's nationally recognized. This is ridiculous. So she starts a letter writing campaign to Abe Lincoln, and he gets on board.
So Sarah Hale, who I also remember as the writer of Mary Had a Little Lamb, uh, starts a campaign to get Lincoln on board. So is Lincoln the one that then determined it's the fourth Thursday of the month, and we eat chick turkey and we have stuffing and we have mashed potatoes? Or are we not quite there yet? Is it just Lincoln joins board with Sarah Hale and then we're still in crazy mode?
Sarah Hale is the catalyst for pushing Lincoln into making a speech and creating a national day. And so at this point, we're still not right on the same exact timeline that we are today. We have to, push it up closer to we have the Civil War happen. And then Abe Lincoln decides, okay, we need a national day. After that, we have, the 1900s hit. So in the 1920s, you have a lot of things happening with the economy at that time. The Depression is happening. In 1920, the National Football League formed. And so there was some talks of having a wider readership and attendance-ship at that point, and what day could we do it on? So that's how the National Football League got their foothold on playing on Thanksgiving Day. The Detroit Lions had their first game in 1934 on Thanksgiving, and that started a tradition there. Another point of reference would be in the 20s, Macy's actually started having small parades. So the first Macy's parade was actually done by the employees, which were primarily immigrants who wanted to have a national sense of pride. They wanted to learn new ways. This was their new land. They wanted to be a part of everything. And so they dressed up like clowns, cowboys, and, walked the streets or got in their horse and buggy and went down the streets. And then in 1927, that's when Macy's Day Parade started having these really big, huge balloons that they would feature.
Okay, so we're starting to sound like the actual Thanksgiving now. We've got football, we've got Macy's Parade, we've got a day because you just said Lincoln basically set a day. So that's the end of it, right? I mean, obviously, I know you told me a funny story about the balloons, but I'm going to let you tell that because that was hilarious when you told me about the balloons earlier. But we're done, right? I mean, there's no more changes to Halloween or Thanksgiving. We've now got turkey, mashed potatoes, football, and balloons. We are good. We are done, right?
No, not even close. I'm going to put up a couple of pictures of the early Macy's Day Parade photos of these just massive balloons. And the funny part about it is that the organizers of the parade at that time didn't have any sort of post-production plan. How do you tear down these balloons? They just thought, okay, well, we'll create them and then we'll figure it out afterwards. But what ended up happening is they released them into the air and put a little note at the bottom with a return address, like you would put in your underwear. This underwear belongs to Tom. They had a return address, return this to Macy's in New York, and we'll give you a prize. So that's how, the parade started, and it just kind of grew from there. We're still in the, Great Depression time frame. FDR hits the picture at that point.
Okay, so got the parades, we got all that stuff. So now you're saying FDR is coming into it. So did FDR do something? I know you've mentioned before that you were, when we were kind of going over the pre-game here, you were telling me that FDR is there's something funky about FDR, something about 1941 or 43. You said something that there were two Thanksgivings and Texas had two periods. So tell me about that.
The merchant groups of that area actually lobbied FDR to change the Thanksgiving day so it would allow customers to have more time for Christmas shopping. So it was really a commercialism, growth agenda. It was to stimulate the economy. We're still talking like recovery from the Great Depression. And so this is what FDR did. He, decided to change the day. Again, lots of different shifting around, change the day to allow an extra week or so, extra time for retail therapy.
Okay, so what you're talking about is when he moved it forward a date. So from what I read is at that time, the Democrats and Republicans then decided to split Thanksgiving. That the Republicans were saying that, oh, this is Lincoln's time, so we need to celebrate it on the 30th, which is what that year was. And the Democrats supporting Roosevelt moved it to the 23rd, and that 23 states supported Roosevelt, 22 states supported the 30th, and then Texas actually had two Thanksgivings that year. So the 23rd and the 30th, they had both of them. And so from what I understand of it, then after that, in 1941, basically from pressure from Democrats, FDR moved it, or from Republicans, sorry, FDR moved it back to the fourth Thursday of the month, where it was voted in by Congress to be the fourth Thursday of the month, even if that isn't necessarily the last Thursday of the month, because there are a few years. I mean, I know a couple of years ago we had it on like there was all another week of Thanksgiving after Thanksgiving that it was on. So basically we have it today on the weekend. We have it because an agreement happened between marketing officials and the president to make it the fourth Saturday finally. That sounds about right, doesn't it, Brooke?
Oh, there were so many angry people about this decision to switch the days. I mean, you had Republicans versus Democrats. The National Football League was super ticked off. The New York Times wrote a scandalous article about how dare FDR. So there was an insane amount of controversy over shifting the days of Thanksgiving.
All right. So that sounds like that's the end of the story. So, you all can now go and enjoy your Thanksgiving dinner, have your big fat turkeys and whatever side you have. I know my family is a mashed potatoes and stuffing kind of family. My kids won't touch sweet potatoes. So if anyone suggests that I make sweet potatoes for them, they might come to your house and scream at you for it. But that's the end of the story. So go enjoy your Thanksgiving, guys. Let us know if there's any special family things that you guys do for Thanksgiving. If there's some special recipe that you guys have that you think everyone in the world needs to have, let us know down in the comments what that is. If there's some special way you cook your turkey or some special way that you do something, let us know. And then, of course, like we talked about, the row is open. We got about a month and a half left before we close up for the season. So if you want to get your dose of the row in, come swing by and see us. Like we've talked about, we've got a great exhibit items from Moonlight Leather. We still have all those great items from Cat Designs, and then we constantly are putting those up on the Facebook page here, so keep an eye out for them. And then, of course, we do have those brand new magnets I talked about. Brooke, if you want to go grab one of those so we can show the people what that looks like, that would be wonderful. In a second, I'll have Brooke flash up here with the awesome view of those brand new magnets we have. We actually just recently found some beavers that we found as magnets as well. So we're going to use those as magnets as well. You guys can come by and get those. So I'm going to switch over to Brooke here real quick.
Ooh la la.
Again, thank you guys so much for joining us here today. And do come swing by and see us at all of our great exhibits. And then, of course, like I said, keep an eye on the website for Giving Tuesday stuff. It's going to start coming out soon. And then if you are a member, you should be getting some stuff in the mail about some special events coming up soon for membership only. But we do look forward to you to keep an eye on that. And Brooke, do you have anything else to say to the people today?
Yeah, so I'm a very visual person. So if you have any Thanksgiving photos that you would like to share with us, please comment below. I'd love to see that. If you have any stories about Thanksgiving with you and your family past, that would be great to hear as well. Email us, message us on Facebook. So thank you so much for watching today.
Just like Brooke said, thanks so much for joining us today. And you guys have a happy Thanksgiving. And we'll see you back here next week